So welcome back to Season 6, Episode 2 and Part 2 of our discussion. We are talking about lessons from the American speaker election. So Part 1, Lyra, we just talked about the American system, who is the speaker, and why the whole election is so refreshing, decentralization. And we just felt like there is a bit of similarity with Malaysian politics, right? And we say, you want to use the word compromise or you want to use the word consensus. So in this part, we want to zoom in back to Malaysia, okay? So does a compromise / consensus solution, and we want to talk about, does it really provide for greater decentralization, especially federal power? Because the last few episodes and even seasons, we kept talking about how some of the major issues in Malaysia, it comes from over centralization, especially federal power, especially Prime Minister office, okay? So now, a lot of people complain about the 15 rounds because they say, for 4 or 5 days, we can't do anything. How long did it take for Anwar to form the government?
I think
10 days?
Yeah, almost 2
About 10 days, right?
Yeah.
Then remember how long it took for Belgium?
More than 1 year.
500 days, right? I think
Yeah.
around there. So it's like 4 or 5 days. Come on. It's like people have selected memory, And, the first thing that comes to my mind would be like, we had 222 member of parliament, right? Why can't we just lock them in parliament until they reach a decision, And that comes to my mind. But of course, we have a different law. We follow the British system. We are constitutional monarchy. So we have Argon, and he has a constitutional role to identify the persons whom he believes has the command of the majority. And so remember, Muhyiddin was confident he got the SD. So if they are locked out in the parliament, maybe he's a prime minister. I don't know. It's like when everyone is like kind of facing each other, the truth will come out, right? But we are a different system, and clearly we have a monarch who is tasked with the responsibility of finding the person that he thinks has the command of the majority. But I think it's probably fair to say that Malaysian politics have always been dominated by federal power, right? Would you agree?
I mean, definitely. I mean, if you just look at the trend, and also like in the last episode, we just sort of talk about the downgrading. I mean, for lack of better words, like really, I mean, seriously, it's a downgrading of the state for Sabah and Sarawak. So from like equal partners just becoming like
you're talking about the
13
Hosing
states.
on amendment, right? Yeah, okay.
So I mean, just that sort of thing. It just sort of goes to show that was that the original intention? Like has it always been like more federal rights than state rights, that sort of thing. So I think safe to say, generally, we do have more federal power.
Yeah, because when you think about it, they control the education, they control the finance, they control the military, police, interior, safety. So it's like you want to fight, after May 13, Kalon Ningkan wanted to fight, then they send Rascom Rangers and things like that. Then SUPP want to fight, then they appointed them to become federal ministers. So it's like just one by one, divide and conquer. So I think, unfortunately, I have to say that even Tunku Abdul Rahman was part of this. And I mean, people say he wasn't as bad as Razak, but in terms of divide and conquer and pushing for federal power, I think he is as bad as the other prime minister. So now, of course, Sarawak, you say, it wasn't as bad because, you have Yaakob, you have Taib, and they were basically allowed free reign within Sarawak, but everything else, you have to support me. And so many people say that, after the plane crash in Sabah, Rahman Yaakob was so afraid that he just kind of agreed to everything that Hussein On said. And then after that, when you kind of bought over SUPP, the last oppositions, remember they all became federal minister, and that's the end. The rest is history. But just going back to GE15, right, because we saw some parallel, and would you agree that maybe that was the first time in Malaysia we saw some sort of consensus in terms of formation of government?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there is, because it's not like one party having the majority. So generally there is like a lot of give and take that is needed. Then now you have two DPMs and one DPM coming from Sarawak. I think there's a lot of consensus.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, just look at Hanayo just went to Kuching, and before that, she was banned from going there, and now she is a special guest of Abanjo. And I mean, you can say, look, they are forced to have consensus, but I do feel like they are experiencing this aspect of politics and government that perhaps they never seen before. Because the Westminster system is very much winner takes all.
Yep.
You win the legislature, you majority in parliament, you also dominate the executive. But whereas the American system always have this, because you can have the president from one party, the Congress from another party, then even the AG, I mean not federal level, but state level could be different, you know. So interesting. I mean, the same election in a state, they can vote for a governor from one party, AG from a different party, then a judge from another different party. So it just shows that when people are thinking, you know, they look at the people. So, I mean, just going back a bit of our history, right? I mean, look at before GE13, basically it's Barisan Nasional all the way. I mean, they are so dominant. In fact, I would say you don't even have opposition. And that's why parliament has been reduced to rubber stamp for a long time. Yep. Then GE13 and 14, of course, the beginning of Pakatan Rakyat at that time. And then we passed and things like that. They were competitive, you know, GE13, GE14. And those days is really winner takes all kind of thing. And that's why it's very, very ugly. War attrition, zero-sum game. So if you lose everything.
Yeah.
So this time round, because of the result, they are forced to have consensus. So of course, this is early days. I mean, I don't really want to call it unity government. Did you like the term unity government?
It's a little bit weird.
Is it a unity government? You say? I know we called our episode in season 5 unity government, but do you feel it's unity government?
Well, maybe if you talk about the way how they work with each other. I mean, even just like what you say about YB Hannah going to like just...
Maybe a consensus government is better.
That's quite a mouthful, you know, compared like 3 syllable versus 2 syllable.
Or just call Anwar Ibrahim's government, right? That's also quite mouthful. But of course, some of the ever skeptical media analysts were saying, you know, I just read one article today and say that, look, the friendly front, especially between DAP and UMNO, is simply castle in the air. This is from a Malay analyst, I can't remember his name. And of course, then you go back to the American speaker, because the American speaker, one thing we didn't mention was the 20 people are mostly from the MAGA, the ultra-conservative. And when we say conservative, they are not socially conservative. They are more like in terms of economic, small government conservative. They are more into that. Matt Gaetz and all those people. So they are saying the same thing there, that look, this temporary truce between MAGA and so-called establishment GOP is going to, basically they say it's a la-la land kind of thing. But what do you think? You know, is this a very skeptical approach, or do you think something is really brewing and maybe competing parties will learn to enjoy working with one another?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, like, I guess after a while, I guess it's more like, you know, like when you can't really reach a consensus sort of things, then when you finally start to get it work.
Actually, you kind of like it, right?
Yeah, I guess like people sort of had that sort of mindset. Okay, let's just move past behind. I mean, because earlier on you talk about the political persecution. I mean, in our earlier episodes and stuff like that. So when do we put an end to this sort of thing? So maybe another way to put it is also, when do we put an end to all this striving, you know? Then they could just begin to move forward and actually present an effective government. And I mean, I guess kind of like the development that we see in our first DPM, Zahid. Like, it's been quite responsive, like the natural disaster mitigation.
Yeah, people are not
like
used
that.
to seeing that and kind of praising DAP. And but I do feel like what you are saying, that it is a positive development. And we need to move away from strongman politics, because I think it's the circumstances after World War II, the whole nation, I mean, not just Malaysia, but nearby nation. That's why you have Sukarno, Suharto, you have Lee Kuan Yew, you have Marcos.
Yep.
Because it's like when people cannot decide for themselves, you just have to be... I mean, Mahathir, of course, was a product of his time, I guess. And people allow him to do what he wants. So, yeah, I mean, consensus, you think about it, it's a bit like during our school time, right? You join a club, you have a committee, and yeah, this is chairman, but chairman don't behave like Mahathir.
Yeah.
You kind of like, okay, what do you all think? That kind of thing. What's the thing that's happening? Oh, the lights have changed. So anyway, one of the things that we want to mention is really, since we're on the topic of consensus and later we want to move into decentralization, it's almost 100 days, not quite, but we are approaching. I just read that the Prime Minister was wanting every ministry, every minister to kind of come up with a report card. But what's your assessment and what do you feel the sentiment? I mean, this is a bit out of our topic, but kind of like a bit of preview, since we're talking about the whole concept of consensus. What's your take at the moment?
I guess it's like examination time. Like showing report cards and stuff like that. I mean, now it's the season of appraisal, right? Everyone.
But is it enough to show?
I have no idea. I mean, but I say even just 100 days. I mean, you have manifesto, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just work along the lines of like all those manifesto. How much have you achieved, and are you on the track to achieving it? It's like you can get a glimpse of how the future direction is going to be like.
Yep.
So I think it's on that note, I would sense that it's more of a positive sort of vibe in general.
Yeah. So you feel a positive vibe, and like now it's like a holiday season, celebration season, Chinese New Year. So the economy seems a bit on the upward trend. I mean, just from the busyness of people going out and willing to spend money, and China's border open already. So you feel a more positive vibe?
I think generally, yes. I would say maybe the whole cabinet members, they are very, very keen to perform.
Okay.
I mean, of course, it's still at early stage. Hopefully it will last.
So yeah, I think one of the things now that you mentioned is that there hasn't been too many plots out there to bring down Anwar Ibrahim. So, I mean, of course, Muhyiddin and Hamza say this and that, but you generally don't feel like people are in the mood for a mutiny and bring down the government. I mean, of course, Sabah is boiling, Terengganu, there's a few states, I think one article today or yesterday say Anwar contending with 3 states in trouble, something like that. So, I mean, you can't avoid problems forever, but generally, I do you agree? Not much appetite for this kind of...
I guess at the end of the day, you still have to think of them as politicians.
Yeah. I mean, it will come to that, but not so soon, I guess.
Yeah, but I guess all these are still calculated sort of move, as in no one is wanting to stir up the boat unnecessarily.
Yeah. So coming back to the whole discussion of consensus, and we kind of alluded to this maybe the last few episodes, whereas we say, look, when you have consensus, you have unity government, and even from the American speaker elections, perhaps we are going down the path of decentralization. So this will be the final thing I want to say today. So remember, decentralization was really one of the themes for GE14.
Yes.
Because the opposition came and say, look, we have one NDB because over centralization of PMO. And that was what they say. And then, of course, GE15, and then the whole kind of unity / whatever government. Then Anwar appointed himself as finance minister, some unhappiness there, etc., etc. But what do you think about the decentralization that is happening? Are we seeing some prime minister office decentralization?
Honestly, that I'm not too certain yet. I mean,
not so obvious, right? I mean,
Yeah, given the position that Anwar Ibrahim himself holds, I mean, as the finance minister. So I'm not too sure. I think I'll be keen to see if he's training up another person, literally, to take over that finance minister role.
I mean, all the NGO, Bar Council, they criticize him. But remember, we were saying that, look, we fully understand from a political point of view why he had to do this, from a political currency point of view, because I mean, you say consensus, but you still need someone to be the tiebreaker, right? You still need someone to really control. And I think one thing Anwar Ibrahim has been consistent is that he said his most important task is to revive the economy. He did say that.
Yep.
So if that's your main task, for you to become Minister of Finance, I guess is not too unreasonable.
Yeah, I mean, that totally I agree. I mean, kudos to him as well. I mean, the economic opening up and stuff like that. But I think, in my mind, I guess there should be a cutoff.
Yeah.
There should be a timeline that you set. Like,
agree fully.
I mean, I guess it's just like earlier on, he was expecting the leadership to be handed over to him by Tun Mahathir, but then that didn't transpire and stuff like that. So I guess it's like, maybe there should be a cutoff, like a more intentional sort of accountability. I think that would be something that I would be keen to see. I mean, if we really want to look at decentralization of PM office.
Yeah, and that's another thing. One of the things that people don't realize why PMO is so powerful is because it controls the MOF. In fact, the real power is in MOF. That's right. One of the noted economists, Professor Terence Gomez, wrote a book called MOF in Corp. Because MOF basically control all the GLC.
Yep.
It control Securities Commission. It's like the power is just unbelievable. Okay, all the professionals are under them. So the real power is in MOF. I think Anwar understood this. So yeah, I mean, I guess it will have to be tested, and ultimately his fruits and results will have to be judged. But for now, personally, I still can tolerate it for a while.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, he has been doing a good job.
Okay, let's talk about another decentralization. What about federal power in relation to states? And, we've been talking about MA 63. And so do you see some of the discussion now? Of course, now Sarawak, Fadila, of course, is now a DPM.
Yep.
But some of the things, not by him, but every time they want to raise certain issue, they go to the grassroots, ask some junior people to raise, so there's no repercussion. So remember what Sarawak was asking? They want autonomy in health, education.
Yep.
Okay, let me just ask you, do you think this can happen? Okay, maybe I should ask you, do you think it's a good thing?
Actually, I do. Though. I do. I mean, just talking about like health, for instance, you see literally what has happened over the last 2 years, especially with all this. I guess there has not. I guess it's like if you study the model of NHS in the UK, you can just see the whole public health system is like just being overwhelmed.
Because you centralize everything.
Because everything like has to go back to HQ say okay. But it's like it just goes to show that so much budget goes there. Then after that, the central committee decide the whole thing. So, but is it necessarily the best thing for each state? So I think each state, I mean, not just about Sabah and Sarawak. So if every state has that right to control like the health system, then you get to elevate the general health of your citizens. So I think that itself, I think health will be a good thing. And I do think there is probably a leverage given that now Fadila is the
Definitely.
DPM.
I think the fact that it's raised and there's no immediate pushback shows that, I mean, even during COVID time, you have SDMC, Sarawak Disaster Management Committee, basically able to make a decision independent of the National Security Council. So that is already decentralization. I mean, never mind the fact that SDMC decisions were mostly crap most of the time.
Maybe people too scared to go over there also.
Yeah, I know. So it's it's a good thing. I agree with you. I could see that happening, and all this will lead to more decentralization and less abuse. Okay, and now let's talk a little bit. I think this can be our last point already because time is running out. Well, do you think do you think there is a real separation of power?
Oh, I thought I was supposed to ask you. No,
Yeah, but maybe you say first, then I can give my 2 cents.
honestly, I think because the executive branch and the judiciary branch, I mean, they are a whole same bunch of people.
This is a Westminster system.
Yeah, the Westminster system in
Quote unquote weakness, a lot of people will argue is a strong point.
I mean, true, you definitely get more consensus moving forward and stuff like that, get more things done, but you also get more damage done. So I think to me, I would say, especially what has happened over the last 2 years, is that you really just see that too much power is at the central committee. I mean, as in the federal level. So how do you actually give an account to the people?
Yep.
So it's like everyone just have to listen to that 222 member of parliament. So I think on itself, I don't really see that there is a true separation of power. It's like every cabinet members are being appointed at the advice of the prime minister. So even the judges as well. So all this thing just goes to show that it's like at the end of the day, you kind of like have to kowtow to prime minister.
Yeah, actually, the prime minister really still has a lot of leverage, and now you start to hear stories about how the last general election when Mahathir went in, he really stopped certain people from going in, like Rafizi, like all those people supposed to be cabinet minister proposed by PKR, but as prime minister you can override all your partners, that kind of thing. So yeah, so I mean the system is what it is.
But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, because we inherited the British system, which, by the way, England and UK doesn't have a written constitution. I think a lot of people don't understand that. But they have the tradition, they have the law, they have the practice. Malaysia has a written constitution, but we are still very much modeled on Westminster system, which you already alluded. The member of parliament and the government are the same gang.
Yep.
So there is some kind of conflict there, but the American system is very, very different because I guess because they kind of came out, they rebel, and so they thought about the system and said, look, we're going to make it more balanced. But I just want to mention one of the, of course, most respected legal thinker, William Blackstone. He influenced an entire generation of legal thinker, governmental thinker, respected both in Westminster system and also American politics, because the first 100 years of Supreme Court in US basically is William Blackstone. So he said the parliament is supreme. So it's a doctrine of supremacy of parliament. But I can tell you many politicians would disagree, because to them it's like, no, the executive is a king. So I think one of the things I think to close today is really we are seeing a bit of that, because people are saying, look, we need parliament to have a bit more role instead of just rubber stamping.
Yep.
Maybe MSCC chief requires some kind of confirmation from parliament. In fact, Law Minister Azalina herself kind of proposed for that. What about Attorney General? Then you should split Attorney General into the chief prosecutor, and then another one will be the actual legal advisor.
Yep.
Then the prosecutor, because it's a public interest position, should be confirmed by parliament. I think it's a good thing, but I'm not sure the Prime Minister cabinet are prepared to let go of their power. But we are in that direction because of the consensus nature of the current government. So do you think it's a good thing?
Yeah, most definitely. I think at the end of the day, people have to think that that's who we voted in for. So I think generally it's a very, very positive outcome from G15. Yeah,
can you imagine if GLC chairman has to be confirmed by parliament? Oh my.
That would be so interesting.
That would be so interesting. I mean, that will really, really bring accountability to another level. But these are the things that we can imagine. And I think in the future episode, we want to talk about all these things. But anyway, our time is really up again, and we have been trying very hard to maintain our time. Any concluding thoughts from this episode? I mean, this 2-part episode.
No, I guess people just have to see the outcome from the speaker election, and really just see how we can actually implement the same for Malaysia as well. I mean, there are ways to do it legally, properly, but it takes time. It is a process that people just have to adhere to. So I think just 4-5 days of that 15 rounds of voting. I mean, compared to here, like 10 days of confirming a prime minister. I think that's a maturing process for all of us.
Correct.
And that's something that we can all really start to be a bit more open-minded about.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail with the word process, because that's something we just have to embrace and be not so cynical. You know, I think generally people are so cynical when it comes to politics. Malaysian very much so. But yeah, hopefully we come into a new era where we can agree to disagree and we can agree to fight, but at the end of the day, we can get something that's productive and useful.
Yeah, I mean, I just like what Charlie could say. I mean, because I was listening to his podcast and he was just interviewing Representative Matt Gates. And then he was saying, I'll be honest, I was skeptical. It's like, I didn't know if you guys could actually bring the deal home. But he did say, and to his credit, he did say that he remained to be open-minded about the whole thing. And then he also tried as much as possible to be as objective as possible that he could. And then it really worked out well, you know.
You're talking about Gates or Kurt?
Gates and also Chip Roy. So he was like really just saluting these two people.
Yeah, they kind of like bring in the poker face. And it's like, hey, all in, man, all in. And I think they pull off one of the greatest political reform in the house. But anyway, more analysis in days to come. Our time is really, really up. So that's it for now.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.